When The Flash was first announced, it was meant to be the shining jewel of the DCEU. The film would reset everything, unify timelines, and serve as a soft reboot for Warner Bros.' superhero universe. Instead, it became the franchise's death rattle, a movie years in the making, plagued by delays, behind-the-scenes controversies, and a studio in chaos. The Flash finally hit theaters in 2023, and the result was frankly a mess. Let's break this film down, what worked, what didn't, and why it ended up as a final death nail in the DCEU. Along the way, I'll also give you some background, production history, and trivia to put this troubled project into perspective. The Flash had been in development since 2004, when David S. Goyer pitched a version that never materialized. Over the years, directors came and went: Phil Lord and Chris Miller, Seth Grahame-Smith, Rick Famuyiwa, John Francis Daley, and Jonathan Goldstein all signed on at various points, only to leave over creative differences. Andy Muschietti, best known for his It films, finally took the reins, and Ezra Miller, first cast as Barry Allen way back in 2014, remained attached through it all. By the time the film was ready, Warner Bros. Had already announced James Gunn's DCU reboot, so The Flash instantly became redundant. It wasn't a bold new beginning, it was an awkward farewell. The film loosely adapts the Flashpoint storyline from the DC Comics. Barry Allen, still haunted by the death of his mother, learns he can travel back in time. Against Bruce Wayne's warnings, Barry goes back to stop her murder, creating an alternate reality. In this timeline, there are no metahumans. General Zod returns from Man of Steel, and Batman isn't Ben Affleck, it's Michael Keaton, reprising his role more than 3 decades after Batman Returns. Along the way, Barry meets a younger version of himself, teams up with Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, and tries to fix the broken universe he accidentally created. On paper, this sounds like a fascinating multi-universe adventure. In practice, it's an overstuffed, convoluted mess that overstays its welcome. Ezra Miller plays both prime Barry Allen and his younger, more immature self. Technically, Miller handles the dual performance well, the acting is solid, and the interactions between the two Barrys are convincing. But here's the problem: Ezra Miller is just not a likable screen presence. Off-screen controversies and legal troubles had already poisoned the audience's perception, and on-screen, their take on Barry comes off as annoying, whiny, and hard to root for. Michael Keaton is clearly the highlight for many viewers. Seeing him back in the cowl after 31 years is pure nostalgia, though even that comes with caveats. The film doesn't honor his Batman so much as exploit him. Tim Burton himself criticized Warner Bros. For misappropriating his version of Batman and using him as fan service. Sasha Calle debuts here as Supergirl, and while she gives it her all, the script leaves her underdeveloped. She's more of a plot device than a character. Ben Affleck returns briefly here in his version of Batman, but it's little more than a cameo. Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman pops up for another awkwardly forced appearance, and then of course there are the digital cameos, CGI recreations of Christopher Reeve, Helen Slater, and even Adam West. These moments were universally panned, not only for looking cheap and unfinished, but also for raising ethical questions about resurrecting dead actors with digital technology. And don't even get me started on the little cameo right at the end of the film where George Clooney reprises his role as literally the worst ever Batman. Now I get this is tongue-in-cheek, and it's supposed to be a moment that you pop for, but frankly it just showed me this type of film really sort of scraping the barrel to get engagement and likes. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the CGI. It is without exaggeration some of the worst visual effects in a big budget superhero film I've ever seen. Director Andy Muschietti defended the look, saying the distorted imagery inside the Chronobowl was meant to be representative of Barry's subjective perception of time travel, but the audiences didn't buy it. Everything looked rubbery, fake, and unfinished. From floating babies in the opening rescue scene to an uncanny valley of cameos of long-dead actors, the movie's visuals were shocking in the worst way. It looked like an early 2000s video game rather than a 2023 blockbuster. For a film that reportedly cost around $220 million to make, it was completely unforgivable. The first 2 acts are okay. They set up Barry's motivation, introduce the alternate reality, and bring in Keaton's Batman. There's some fun action beats and even flashes of humor. But by the 3rd act, everything collapses. The climax drags endlessly with repetitive battles against General Zod. Supergirl's arc is wasted, the stakes are muddled, and the film devolves into a spectacle of bad CGI and empty fan service. Instead of exploring Barry's grief over his mother, the story uses her death as nothing more than a springboard for uninspired multiverse plotting. That's a huge missed opportunity, because at its heart, Flashpoint is about loss and acceptance. The movie tries hard to be funny, but most of the humor falls flat. The younger Barry's immaturity is played for laughs, but instead it is irritating. Jokes about Superman not existing in this timeline, or Keaton's Batman saying, "let's get nuts," come across as cheap nostalgia rather than genuine wit. Critically, The Flash bombed. It received mixed to negative reviews, with praise for Keaton and some of the time travel mechanics, but harsh criticism for its CGI, overstuffed story, and reliance on cameos. Financially, it was also a disaster, opening below expectations. The film earned around $270 million worldwide, far below the break-even point. For a movie once hyped as the reset for the DC films, it was instead the final straw. Andy Muschietti later admitted the film failed because it didn't appeal to all four audience quadrants: men, women, young and old. He claimed women especially didn't care about the Flash character. Critics quickly shot this down, pointing out to the long-running success of the Flash CW TV series, which had a large fan base across demographics. The real issue wasn't the character, it was the execution. Some fun trivia notes. The movie went through at least 5 different directors before Andy Muschietti signed on. Ezra Miller reportedly rewrote parts of the script alongside Grant Morrison during development. Michael Keaton's return was originally meant to set up him as the new mentor of the DCEU, replacing Affleck's Batman. That plan was scrapped after the reboot announcement. The ending originally featured Keaton's Batman, Sasha Calle's Supergirl, and Henry Cavill's Superman forming a new Justice League. This, however, was reshot after James Gunn and Peter Safran took over DC Studios. Nicolas Cage's Superman cameo references Tim Burton's cancelled Superman Lives from the 1990s, complete with a giant spider fight, a nod to producer John Peters' infamous demands. Cage himself filmed the cameo, but the final version was digitally altered, which left him disappointed. The CGI recreation of Christopher Reeve and Adam West sparked ethical debates. Many felt it was disrespectful to bring deceased actors back without their consent. Sasha Calle became the first Latina actress to portray Supergirl in a live-action film. Ultimately, The Flash failed because it was a film without purpose. It wasn't a new beginning, it wasn't a satisfying conclusion, and it wasn't even a solid, standalone story. The DCEU had been inconsistent from the start, rushed, reactionary, and desperate to compete with Marvel. But by the time The Flash came out, audiences had already moved on. Marvel was struggling too, but at least it had had a coherent brand. DC was burning itself down while trying to reboot on the fly. So was The Flash the worst superhero movie ever made? No, not quite, but it was certainly one of the most disappointing. There are moments of charm. Michael Keaton's return, some clever time travel ideas, even Ezra Miller's technical skill in playing 2 versions of Barry. But the overwhelming flaws, the CGI, the wasted characters, the bloated third act, and the lack of emotional depth make it hard to recommend. The Flash gets a 4 out of 10. In the end, The Flash will be remembered not as a triumphant reset, but as the final collapse of a franchise that never really found its footing. The DCU is over, and good riddance. So what did you think of The Flash? Let me know down in the comments, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dive reviews.